This is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. This is a topic I have purposefully avoided for a long time, simply because I've never had something to bring to the table that was different from what anyone else had already mentioned. I've heard many great theories on the topic of the two witnesses, and let it be known, I'm not saying any of those other views are wrong. I really like some of them. I've heard how the two witnesses could be Elijah and Enoch, Moses and Elijah, the two houses of Israel, and a combination thereof along with others as well. And again, please know I'm not saying any of those other views are wrong. In fact, when I would listen to a certain view, I'd think, oh, I can see that. And then I'd listen to another view and say, oh, well, I can see that too. It was almost like watching a tennis match. I'd find myself going back and forth, seeing things I liked from each viewpoint and seeing things I just wasn't sure about either. Now, let's read some verses from Revelation discussing the two witnesses. Revelation 11, starting at verse 3. And I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Now, this verse can read two ways. It could mean they are literally standing before Yahweh in heaven, or it could simply mean they serve before Yahweh who is in heaven. We'll come back to this in a moment. These verses in Revelation say the two witnesses are the two olive trees and two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. This is not the first time we see a reference to the two olive trees that serve before Yahweh. We find this same reference here in chapter 4 of Zechariah. We see here the two olive trees are identified as two who are anointed to serve Yahweh. Now, we know that believers are called to be a royal priesthood. This is seen in 1 Peter 2:9 and Revelation 1:6. But that'll take place when Yeshua hands over the kingdom to Yahweh, and he reigns as high priest on earth. This can only happen after the millennium, when there is no longer a temple on earth, as seen here in Revelation 21, verse 22. Why? Because as long as there is a temple on earth, the priesthood of Aaron is to be the priests that serve in it. That's why we see Hebrews 8 discuss how even Yeshua can't be a priest on earth as long as there is a temple on earth. Thus, after the millennium, there will no longer be a temple on earth. Then Yeshua will be high priest on earth, and we will be the priesthood under him. And just as Yeshua is anointed as king, but is not reigning from Jerusalem as king yet, the same applies to believers. The anointing is there, but it's not to happen until the right time. So, these who are anointed in Zechariah 4 are able to do the task now. Thus, this verse in Revelation seems to be referring to Zechariah 4 and discussing two individuals who serve Yahweh here on earth. As far as individuals go, it seems only priests and kings are to be anointed. This is seen here for the priests in Exodus chapter 40, verses 13 through 15, and seen here for the kings in 1 Samuel 10:1, 1 Samuel 16:13, and 1 Kings 1:39. We know Yeshua will be the next anointed king, but please remember, as I've noted in other teachings, there's reason to believe that could play out just as it did with David and Saul. Though Saul was king, David was anointed as king out in the wilderness. Likewise, while the Antichrist will be ruling as king, Yeshua will be anointed as king, but with his bride in the wilderness for 1 year. This being said, Zechariah 4 implies these 2 olive trees will be of the lineage of Aaron, as they are anointed to serve Yahweh, just as the priesthood was anointed to serve before Yahweh in Exodus chapter 40. We see the 2 witnesses seem to parallel much of what Moses and Aaron did before Pharaoh. Please remember, both Moses and Aaron were Levites. So, under this mindset, who could the 2 witnesses be? Are you ready? Ezekiel and John the Revelator. Sounds silly, right? Of course it does. But let's look into it a little. Now, we know Ezekiel was the son of a high priest, so he could easily fit this scenario. However, what about John? How can he fit this scenario? He wasn't the son of a priest. We know his father was the fisherman Zebedee. His brother was James. James was the first apostle to be martyred. Remember, it was James and John who Yeshua called the sons of thunder, which I find interesting, as it was only John who heard what the 7 thunders spoke in Revelation. So, while James was the first of the apostles to be martyred, John was the last one to remain alive to receive the revelation. John was also the 4th to be called, just as Levi was the 4th born with the 12 sons of Jacob. But again, their father was just a fisherman, right? Well, let's not forget, John the Baptist was just a crazy man out in the desert, right? Wrong. He was the son of a priest, as we see here in Luke chapter 1. John the Baptist was the son of a priest. So, why wasn't John in the temple? The same reason that Zebedee most likely wasn't either. The temple priesthood was most likely taken over by Rome, and Rome filled those positions with those who they wanted and would submit to them. This is most likely why the Pharisees were concerned they would lose their position in John 11:48. Why would they be concerned about their position? Because it was most likely Rome who gave it to them. Plus, a true high priest of Yahweh would never have torn his robes, as we see Caiaphas doing here when they put Yeshua on trial. Why? Because a true high priest would know the commands he is to keep in accordance to the Torah, as seen here in Leviticus 21:10. All I'm saying is, we don't know the whole story behind Zebedee. Yes, he was a fisherman when we read about him at the time Yeshua comes on the scene. But we also see John out in the wilderness at that same time too. Zebedee could have easily been of the priesthood with John the Baptist's dad. Now, before you write this all off as nonsense, let's address some elements that led me this direction, and we'll close out with some interesting timing elements as well. We're told these are 2 witnesses in Revelation 11. Witnesses. Ezekiel witnessed the first destruction of Jerusalem. John witnessed the second destruction of Jerusalem. Both destructions included rebellion of Yahweh's people. Thus, they could fit as the 2 witnesses proclaiming what's coming. And what's coming? The destruction of Jerusalem again. During a time when Jerusalem will be on top of the world with the Antichrist ruling from Jerusalem. These two men will be declaring its coming destruction if the people don't repent. Two men who saw it happen before will be proclaiming its coming again. They're witnesses. They both saw it already. Thus, they're the ones who will be able to declare its coming again. Both Ezekiel and John were given a word to share, seen here in Ezekiel 3, Ezekiel 33, and Revelation 1. But lots of prophets were given a word from Yahweh and told to give it to the people, right? However, only Ezekiel and John were specifically given an open scroll with writing on each side, told to eat it, and then told to prophesy. They were the only ones told to eat the scroll. It's seen here in Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 9 through chapter 3, verse 3 for Ezekiel. Please notice the scroll is open with words on both sides, words of lament and woe. It tasted sweet and filled his stomach. And as seen here in Revelation chapter 10, verses 8 through 10 for John. Notice the parallels. Told to eat the open scroll. It tastes sweet and made his stomach bitter. So what was this scroll in Revelation? This is Yeshua holding the scroll he just opened with the seals on it in chapter 5. It has words on both sides, words of lament and woe as given to Ezekiel. In fact, the seventh seal continues with the 7 trumpets. The 5th trumpet is called the first woe, with 2 more to follow. The 6th trumpet is the release of the 200 million man army for war. The 7th trumpet is the resurrection as prophesied through the prophets. What many don't realize is how the first 6 seals are opened immediately back to back, with the trumpets being set off simultaneously with the 7th seal, all to set the stage for the time of the tribulation, showing us the seals and the trumpets take place at the beginning of the tribulation, with the bowls taking place at the end. Yes, even the 7th trumpet with the resurrection takes place before the tribulation. This is seen in Isaiah 66, with the birth happening before the birth pains. Please see our teaching, Birth Pains, for more on that. In fact, just after the mention of the 7th trumpet, we see where John is told to take the scroll and to eat it. But Steve, Revelation says it would turn his stomach bitter. But Ezekiel's account says it just made his stomach full. And you're absolutely right. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever overeaten before? I mean, seriously overeaten. If you have, you know how your whole stomach can truly feel bitter. Thus, the similarity is still there. The interesting thing is how Ezekiel is specifically told to go to Israel, and John is told to prophesy about foreigners. Why about the nations? Because the nations are being deceived by the Antichrist, who is ruling from Jerusalem. One to Israel and one about the nations. Some might say, but the 2 witnesses are prophesying in Israel. You're showing how Ezekiel and John are prophesying to 2 different people groups. How can they be the 2 witnesses when the 2 witnesses will be in the land? We must remember, just as Yeshua will bring the 2 houses of Israel together, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, the Antichrist desires to do the same thing. That's why we see 10 horns on one beast in Revelation 13 and 2 horns on the other, representing the 10 lost tribes of the northern kingdom and Judah with Benjamin in the southern kingdom. So, the 2 witnesses will be addressing both kingdoms in the land, and that will happen during the rule of the Antichrist. This is what we see in Revelation. After we see the seals were broken and the trumpets were given, they eat the open scroll. Then we see the time of the 2 witnesses through Revelation 11. These 2 individuals are prophesying virtually the same amount of time we see the Antichrist ruling. Something we find of interest is what happens after Ezekiel and John both eat the scrolls that are given to them. Ezekiel eats the scroll in chapter 3. He goes to those who are already in captivity, showing this is after the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. It was here that Ezekiel was declared a watchman from Yahweh to give the people warning. Then he starts prophesying the end-time destruction coming on Jerusalem. So, how do we know this prophecy is regarding the end times and not about 70 AD? Because of the words given in verses 4 through 6. This judgment that was coming wasn't just for Judah. It was declared for both houses of Israel. 390 days for the house of Israel and 40 days for Judah, for a total of 430 days. Please see our teaching 1/3 or the coming alien invasion in Bible prophecy for more on that. So, it's the 430 days of judgment that was given after Ezekiel ate the scroll. And just as Ezekiel was given this prophecy after the first destruction, likewise, John was given this prophecy after the second destruction of Jerusalem. So both had no doubt the destruction they were prophesying about was concerning a future event. As with Ezekiel, immediately after John ate the scroll, we see the time of the 2 witnesses. This is when they're prophesying during the reign of the Antichrist. We know this because it's the Antichrist who kills the 2 witnesses, as seen here in Revelation 11. However, Daniel shows this time of the end actually has 30 added days, as he shows the total time will be for 1,290 days. Ironically enough, the 430 days of Ezekiel is exactly 1/3 of that 1,290 days mentioned in Daniel, showing the days are cut short as mentioned by Yeshua. Thus, our teaching 1/3, and also discussed in our teaching the coming alien invasion and Bible prophecy. As you can see, Ezekiel and John are connected in many ways. Another interesting element to consider regarding Ezekiel and John is how they both discuss the coming millennial kingdom. Ezekiel gives much detail to it in Ezekiel chapter 40 through 48, where John references its actual length. I know many would say, but Steve, Ezekiel and John have already died. How can they be the 2 witnesses? Do we really believe Yahweh couldn't raise them to life for this purpose? I'm not talking about resurrecting them. I'm talking about raising them back to life with their mortal body. He's done that before, right? I mean, even with Lazarus, we know it was the 4th day, which is believed to be when decomposition of the body had already set in. This alone shows he can raise someone back to their original physical being regardless of the condition of their body. Now, am I saying this is a fact? as far as it's going to be them? Not at all. However, the more I look into it, the more I see these two individuals fitting the role. Many of you know my theory regarding the 4 fasts that are turned to feasts, as mentioned here in Zechariah chapter 8. However, as I continue to study and examine this, I'm concerned these fast days that are turned to feast days are rejoiced in under the hand of the Antichrist. The tribulation is going to be a time of deception, as noted by Yeshua. Thus, when the days of the Antichrist are here, it will have the appearance that the positive prophecies from Zechariah are coming true. Zechariah gives many good things that are declared to come in chapters 8 through 10. However, the enemy will use them to deceive the people under the Antichrist. Either way, there's reason to believe something should happen right before these fasts that are turned to feasts to set everything up for the times of rejoicing. That being said, we know the fast of the 4th month is on the 9th day. So, if this day is to be turned into a time of rejoicing, there's reason to believe it would be precluded by something to set it up as such. Interestingly enough, we see Ezekiel chapter 1 starts off just before that fast day by starting on the 5th day of the 4th month. On that 5th day of the 4th month, Ezekiel sees a storm coming. Is this the storm of Yahweh as prophesied to come as seen here in Jeremiah? It was on this 5th day when Ezekiel saw the glory of the Lord as seen here in verses 26 through 28. Please notice the rainbow in the dark clouds. The figure of a man as glowing hot metal and full of fire. It was on this day he was given the scroll to eat. Now, compare the similarities to what happened with John just before he was given the scroll to eat. Notice he saw a mighty messenger, interpreted as an angel here, clothed in a cloud and rainbow, bright as the sun with legs of fire, holding the scroll, and gave a shout like a lion. So, who is this mighty messenger? He's none other than Yeshua himself, who just opened the scroll from chapter 5 and is noted as the Lion of Judah in chapter 5. Thus, his roar as a lion here. It's very possible Ezekiel and John are seeing the exact same vision, and very possibly on the exact same day, the 5th day of the 4th month. Again, there are similarities between Ezekiel and John that can't be ignored. And it's what takes place after they eat the scrolls that are interesting just the same. Again, these two men will be prophesying destruction to Jerusalem during a time when Jerusalem will be on top of the world. The time when the Antichrist will be ruling from Jerusalem. These two men will be declaring its coming destruction if the people don't repent. But this will be a time when the modern state of Israel will most likely have just destroyed all their opponents. Their pride will be at an all-time high. They'll believe they're invincible with their prophesied Messiah ruling the world. A common phrase that's been heard over the years from the modern state of Israel is, "Never again," referencing the time when they were all but wiped out in the concentration camps of Germany. If you think about it, that's a bold statement, but at the same time, I get it. It's a statement of resolve, a determination to not let it happen again. However, in the eyes of Yahweh, it could be a statement of pride. In fact, when Yahweh sends the two witnesses saying it will happen again, they may harden their hearts against the word of Yahweh. But this arrogance is not something new for Israel, as seen here in the book of Hosea. When the Ark of the Covenant comes out, they'll see themselves as unbeatable. This will be especially so when the Antichrist and false prophet calls fire down from heaven, as noted here in Revelation chapter 13. That's what happened with David and Solomon, two of their dearly loved kings. The ark will even appear to speak as when the voice of Yahweh spoke to Moses from between the cherubim on top of it. This is covered in our teaching, The Image of the Beast. It will be the ultimate Deuteronomy 13 test, thinking they are serving Yahweh, but they will be serving him by mixing their own traditions passed down to them, thus adding to the Torah, something that is forbidden by Yahweh. But when we look at the history of Yahweh's people, they are only completely unbeatable if they are fully obedient to him. You see, there's a battle at the end that the modern state of Israel will lose. It's called the Battle of Armageddon. As I noted in our two teachings, Satan's Greatest Masquerade, Part 1 and 2, and the Assyrian, the Antichrist surrounds Yeshua at Mount Sinai, but Yeshua prevails. Yeshua then goes to clean house in Jerusalem and claim his throne. This is why he already has blood on him when he comes over the Mount of Olives going into Jerusalem. The two witnesses will be declaring that coming judgment during the days of the Antichrist. During the days when the modern state of Israel is on top of the world. During the days the Antichrist will be conquering any non-Jew who pursues the Torah while holding to the testimony of Yeshua. I believe it's very possible those two witnesses will be the two who were given the scroll to eat and who literally witnessed the first two destructions of Jerusalem. Thus, they are the two witnesses proclaiming it's going to happen again. Proclaiming to a people whose heart is hardened in their ways because they are sitting on top of the world. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.